All of the peppers that I topped off seem to be growing really big and bushy, which is really nice because they stay short and stubby, where this one doesn't look like I cut it, and neither does that one. It's kind of growing more tall. Oh my goodness, we have our first tomatoes there. This is a cream sausage tomato, so it is a Roma tomato. It's going to be like an pale orangey color. I basically have some garden maintenance to do in the garden today, and I figured I would take you guys along with me and show you what we have planted. I recently a couple days ago, turned off my drip irrigation to some of my pepper plants because peppers don't need to be watered as much as tomatoes and other like seedlings and stuff that I have out here. So I cut off my pepper beds for about 2 days, especially because one day rained, but I just turned it back on, and I'm gonna go around. I need to clip up tomatoes and stuff like that, and then I'll have some eggplants that I bought because the eggplants that I tried to start from seeds didn't really do well. And I'm just gonna be talking to you guys about what I have planted here in my garden. I guess the first place we'll start is these 2 3x8 beds there, or 2 3x6 beds. I want to turn them into 4x8 beds, but right now they're 3x6, and both of these beds are filled with spicy peppers. There was some spots that I didn't have enough spicy peppers, or they died when I transplanted them, and so I did put in some nasturtiums here, as you can see, and then even a few marigolds. But the rest of these beds are predominantly spicy peppers. Some of the varieties I have growing is shishito, Anaheim. Shishito, I know someone's going to comment and say it's not spicy. It does turn spicy the longer it stays on the vine. So one year shishito pepper turned red, and it actually did get a spice, and I was giving it to my kids, didn't know that it had any hint of spice, and it actually burnt their mouth, and I felt so bad. So ever since then I've been planting it in my spicy pepper bed, because if I want to save seeds and I have my shishitos next to a sweet pepper like a bell pepper, they can cross-pollinate, and then that next year my bell pepper might have like a little kick to it. And so to avoid all of that, I've just been planting my shishito next to my spicy peppers. So I also have where is it? I just saw the name. Anaheim. Oh, Cubanelle. I have things like jalapeno. I have the pumpkin jalapeno. I have a Joe Parker. I have a Mexibel. I have, what does that one say? Beaver Dam. Poblano. I have peppercini. I have I just saw it, Santa Fe Grande, which was actually my favorite spicy pepper for the last 2 years because we would just pickle them, and so I'm hoping I get a lot of those. I have a pimento pepper, which I've never grown before, but I'm hoping that I get some of those so that I can make some things with that. But all of these seem like they're actually starting to get a few buds on them, which is really nice. This bed right here is my in-ground bed, is what I call my in-ground bed. It's 40 feet long, and majority of the things I have here at the front right here, you do see some red onions that are going to seed. But these were in here from last year and I just never pulled them. All of the garlic that I have planted here is majority elephant garlic. Didn't harvest my elephant garlic last year, and so they all started sprouting towards the back of this bed, and I just separated them and planted them out through this whole bed. And so I'm going to be looking forward to getting some more elephant garlic this year. Last year, like I said, I didn't harvest any. I tried to harvest a few. It was too early. I left it in the ground. Then I went on a missionary trip, came back, a lot of stuff going on, and just kind of forgot about it. So they kind of like evaporated and forgot I even planted them until they all started popping up this past October, November, December, and I was able to separate them. And so we'll see. I've never separated garlic before, and I was able to separate them and fertilize them, and we'll see what kind of harvest I get when it's time to harvest them. And in the back I have majority are dwarf tomatoes, and all different varieties. I think I have, like, that one says tasty wine, so it's going to be like a Cherokee purple, but in a miniature form. And that one also is a dwarf tomato, but some of these are just regular cherry tomatoes where I ran out of dwarf tomatoes, and so then I planted cherry tomatoes. Like that one's a Brad Atomic Grape. But this is a velvet red, so this one also isn't a dwarf tomato, but it's called velvet red because the leaves are more velvet, whereas you see, I don't know if you can see, this one has more texture. That's called the velvet red. But I did do a video where I showed the kind of dwarf tomatoes I have, but that's a Katydid, a Yukon Quest. So the rest of them are dwarf tomatoes. I do have basils growing here from last year because this bed also had basils. So we have a bunch of basils sprouting all throughout this bed, and I just left them. Never grown any of the dwarf tomatoes that I'm growing this year, so to get a harvest from any of them, I'm gonna be really super excited. Then moving right along, this first bed, this bed is a 3x15. I have my cherry tomatoes planted here, and that's the bed where I just showed you I had the Roma tomatoes, the cream sausage, but I have 15 on each side. So I have 15 on this side and then 15 on this side, and as you can see, they're falling over, so I need to prune them, and because I am going to just prune them to a single leader. I just saw that this tomato's actually, oh, it's not even there anymore. So I'm missing a rosella. I don't know what happened to that one. It looks like it snapped in half. I do have about, I think, 10 more tomato plants, 10 to 15 more tomato plants inside of the hoop house. I was just looking to see if they were still alive. I haven't watered in there. I have drip going into the tomatoes that are planted in the bed, but I haven't physically hand watered the tomatoes that I still haven't planted out, so I don't know how alive they'll be. But if I do have any, I'll just if I have a rosella, change that out. If I don't have a rosella, just put it in for another tomato so that this bed will be full. But it does look really good. This next bed I kind of just planted out. That's why all the tomatoes over here are on the shorter side, because this bed was filled with ants, and so it took me about a month of having these tomatoes in the ground before I could get these in the ground. But now that they're in the ground, they seem to be doing well, so I'm really happy about that. This is my first year growing tomatoes in these beds. Last year my beds were 3x6s. I made them into 3x15s this year by just connecting the middle. And then it's also my first year growing tomatoes this close with the cattle panels. So I have a foot of space in the middle, and then I planted them 1 foot apart. Usually my tomatoes have been planted at the back of the garden in the log raised beds. So not only is this year I'm growing the most tomatoes I've grown, because I have 4 tomato beds, and each one, 3 out of the 4 have 30 tomatoes, so that's already 90. And then the last bed, which is determinate tomatoes, only have 12 tomatoes on each side. So definitely more than 100 tomato plants growing here, but that's because I've never gotten a great tomato harvest, and so I'm hoping that by me growing more tomatoes this year that I can get a decent tomato harvest with the bigger tomatoes. I've gotten lots of cherry tomatoes, which I do use to make sauce and stuff like that. I still have about 12 jars of canned pasta sauce that I've canned from my tomatoes, but I want to get more of like the big tomatoes, and especially the Roma tomatoes. I've never grown Roma tomatoes before, so I'm hoping that this year I can get a good saucy tomato. This next bed is my sweet pepper bed, and it's a 3x15. I have about, I think, 80 sweet peppers in here, so they're all different varieties. And then I do have some nasturtiums in here. I think I even, do I have a marigold? Yeah, I have a marigold in here. My favorite tomato or pepper that I've been growing, or that I'm excited about, is this fish pepper, because it's variegated. So when I see that variegation, I know that these are fish peppers. I also have one of these growing inside of the Greenstalk over there, the black one. But everything in here looks great, and I'm really happy about what's going on here. Last year I didn't get a pepper harvest because I planted all of my peppers in my hoop house, and then again when I went to my missionary trip, it didn't rain. Well, actually it had I think it was a hurricane, and then my kids got sick and my husband got sick, and so they didn't water inside my hoop house. I lost all of, because that's where I planted probably 99% of my peppers were in that hoop house. So I lost all of my peppers inside of that hoop house. It was very, very sad, unfortunate. So this year I planted all of my peppers mostly in this bed. Some are in the Greenstalk, but for the most part they're all inside this bed. They're on drip, so hopefully this year will be a better pepper harvest for me. I did separate my tomato beds by type. So my first one was a cherry tomato. The second one was it wasn't a beefsteak, but it was bigger than just like a salad or and it wasn't a determinate. So the next one is like a mid, you know, like 12 to 16 ounces. Then this third bed, these are my beefsteak tomatoes. So I have 2 Cherokee purples, I know, which are right here because my friend grew these last year. So these are second year seeds that she saved, and they seem to be doing good. But then I also have this tallest one right here, is something with a A that I don't remember, but it's an orange tomato, and you can see it has so many flowers on it. So I'm really excited to see this. But all of the tomatoes here are growing healthy, and I have clipped some of them, but definitely need to come back in here and prune and continue clipping. This last bed of tomato are all determinate type tomatoes. So these are tomatoes that I'm not pruning, and we shall see. I planted them less close together, so they have more space. In this 15-foot bed I planted 12 of them, but some have fallen over, so I do need to come in here and clip them up. But I was also wondering if it was dying because there's lots of squash bugs on this plant, on these plants, and so I was wondering if the squash bugs was killing it. Either way, eventually I'm gonna have to come in here and harvest these potatoes, but I hope it's a good harvest. You can see, I think they're called squash bugs or stink bugs, but they kind of like took over this whole bed. And then another thing that's interesting is this really big dead spot is the spot that I connected the 2 3x6 beds to make them 15 feet. So the soil that's in here is a different combination of the soil that on the outsides, and they look less dead. The soil that was in here was just pure I think compost. Oh, actually I see some potatoes in here that are turning green because they were getting seen by the sun. So I was just curious about that because that part is dying faster than the sides. And then this next bed is the bed that I just committed to and just planted. We have some strawberries from bare root, and then I have some raspberries also from bare root. But then I just seen in here that we're starting to grow some squash. Those squash I did not plant. I'm pretty sure last year I planted trombonzino squash in this bed, and it was on a trellis, and so that's going to be interesting. I'll probably leave just like one because there's one really big one growing, and then kill all of the rest because I don't want them to kill my strawberries and raspberries that I actually planted in this bed. This wasn't here last time I was here. We actually have some raspberries. I really love raspberries, but I don't like when I get them from the store because then I have to wash them and then they turn mushy. That one was a little sour, but it tasted just like raspberry candy, or like blue raspberry candy, which is delicious. But I don't like getting raspberries from the store because then you wash them and then they turn mush, and I don't really care for that. This is what I call my crossbred, and this is where I planted all my pumpkins. Some of them I planted from seed, and then some of them I transplanted out, and I planted 2 of every variety I had. So that variety is the same as that one, but that seed looks like it hasn't germinated. But they look like they're starting to trail out. And so my hope is that it will completely cover all this landscape fabric and be full. I do have some apple trees planted at the corner of the corners and in the middle, and then I have a lavender bush. And right over from that, I have this bed, and this is my watermelon bed. And again, some I planted from seed and some I transplanted. So the ones that are much bigger are the ones I actually, that's not even a watermelon, that is a cantaloupe, it looks like. But the rest, like those are definitely watermelon. And then seeds that I planted, sugar baby, I think that is, nope, Charleston gray, watermelon. And I haven't planted this bed, so all down this side I've been changing beds to bigger beds. They were, like I said, these 3x15, but now I'm making them bigger. This was a 3x6 and I'm changing it to 4x8. I haven't planted it yet, so it's just been waiting. And then this bed, I planted flowers on this side, but it looks like weeds are trying to take over amongst the flowers that I did plant. And then I do have some squashes and some trailing plants that I'm excited to trail over these new arches. These arches are 3 arches I put together, so I can't wait till they're covered. But right now they're still trying to grow in. And then again on this bed, opposite side, are zinnias and sunflowers. And then moving right over, I recently just transferred this bed into a 4x16. And I transplanted all of my summer squashes, so like zucchinis and yellow squashes and stuff like that. And they're starting to flower, so I look forward to getting some. This was my brassica bed in the fall and early spring. But then there was a really big ant pile here. I do have some sunflowers popping up and some zinnias. And then there's some broccoli that are still here that I'm going to have to end up definitely taking that out soon, so it doesn't shade the plants that I'm trying to plant in here. But the ant pile was like right here and it was taking over, and so it kind of killed all of the brassicas I planted in this bed, which was really unfortunate. And at the end of this bed is my comfrey, which in a previous video I showed you I took all of these leaves out. Comfrey is really good with I want to use it a lot more than I have previous years. It's been there for I think 3 seasons, probably like a year and a half, but it grows prolifically and it's really good for like fertilizing. It has high nitrogen and all that type of stuff. So I want to make it to make like comfrey tea and to fertilize this year and just stuff like that. And so I've been using it as like living mulch to bring beneficial microbes and stuff like that to the soil, because this year I really want to work on bringing some better soil life to my beds. And this bed I recently just changed into my herb bed. So I went to a plant sale and I showed that, but I got this I think it's called lemon thyme, and I planted it here. I got this stevia there. I already had that oregano in another bed and I just moved it there and it seems to be thriving. This is pennyroyal, which I really recently just found out. This whole time I thought it was summer savory because that's what it said on the tag when I planted here. A little tiny plant in the corner of that bed about, I think it was 2 years ago, and obviously it was mislabeled because this is pennyroyal, which is a medicinal herb, and it smells it smells like the best peppermint that you will ever, oh my goodness, the garden kitty. It smells like the best peppermint that you would ever experience or have in your life. And so then I also transferred my other herbs here. So I have chamomile that I transplanted here. I have sage I transplanted here. I have thyme I put here. And then I have my 2 eucalyptus, which I'm not sure if they're going to stay here, but I definitely transplanted them here because I'm not sure how big they're going to get. And then down the 2 arches, I only put 2 arches because this is taking over, so I didn't want to, you know, have to move any of these plants. I want my oregano and the pennyroyal to stay there, especially because the pennyroyal keeps weeds down. But on this side of the bed, I have all of the flowers I got from that plant sale. And this is my first time mulching with, what is it called? Straw. And it's definitely sprouting grass, but I got all my flowers here that I got. And then on the insides are all of my cucumbers. So there's 12 cucumber plants planted here, and this pennyroyal is stopping this cucumber from growing because it's shading out, trying to take over. But all the rest of my cucumbers are starting to grow. And then I saw that one of my cucumbers had gotten pulled out, so I planted 2 more seeds here, but they haven't popped up yet. And then I have an okra in each corner. I've talked about this before, but amaranth is actually a crop for squashes and cucumbers and stuff like that, and it actually works. It's one of those trap crops that actually works, and not something that people say it works and then it doesn't really for everybody. I actually had my own experience with this. About when I first started gardening, I planted a pack of just like, what was it called, wildflower mixes, and this grew. I thought it was going to be a sunflower. It wasn't red, it was green, just like a regular amaranth, and it grew really, really big. And then it started to tassel, which is when I realized it was an amaranth. But all the Japanese beetles ate up the amaranth and left my cucumbers and squashes alone. And so since I have my cucumbers in this bed, and I had cucumbers in this bed last year, as you can see, because there's a cucumber plant that I didn't plant here, and then a whole bunch of seeds right there, which I think are going to be the salt and pepper cucumber, because I found a old tag that said salt and pepper, and so I'm pretty sure it's going to be a salt and pepper cucumber. But that is when I realized that the cucumber beetles left all of my cucumbers and squashes alone and ate up the amaranth. So that's why I planted a amaranth at the end of this bed. And my next 2 beds on this side are bush beans. For the most part, I planted just beans that I had out in a pack, and so I don't really even know what they were. I do see some of them are obviously purple, but they weren't labeled. They were just white beans, and they had just fell out, and so I just planted them because I didn't know what they were. I did plant okra here and here, but on the inside I tried to plant pole beans, but I wasn't even sure if they were pole beans because they weren't labeled. But now they're starting to crawl up. That one's gotten really high over the last week because it wasn't that high before. But I'm curious to see what kind of beans these are, because they have red, which I don't think I've ever grown pole beans that have the red. And so some of these seeds could possibly even be bush beans, and I planted them like this. Looks like bush beans, and I planted them thinking they were pole beans, but these are pole beans because they're starting to grow up. And then I see some starting to grow up here. So we shall see. So, like I said, on the inside are bush beans. These bush beans I planted way after I planted those bush beans, so that's why they're smaller. But then you can see this is bells of Ireland that I actually did not plant. I planted like how many years ago? 2 years ago, and it's just been going to seed and producing more bells of Ireland, which is a cut flower that has spikes along the stem, but it's really, really pretty. It's interesting to see why this is turning yellow. I don't know if it's because it's getting watered too much, since it's turning this color since I've had the drip on it. You use the bells of Ireland for the bells anyway, not the flowers. You take these off, but I'm going to leave it here because it's been growing back every year. Even when I tried to grow bells of Ireland for myself, they don't germinate, but these plants have been self-germinating and looking lovely. I love to use them in flower arrangements, and so I'm going to leave them there, let them keep going to seed and reseeding themselves. Then the final thing on this bed is a corn bed. This is a sweet corn bed, and not all of the seeds have germinated, so I did go back in and replant some sweet corn, some bantam. That is just a tree trying to grow, but hopefully get some great sweet corn this year, because I don't really buy sweet corn from the store. My kids don't like canned corn or frozen corn for that matter, but for some reason they will eat fresh corn right off the stalks. Since we're here, I figured I would mention this bed that looks like a weedy mess, but it actually has a few things going on. We have some clematis that I planted when I first got here 3 years ago, I think. And then I also have some sweet peas that I also planted from seed. And this is the first year I think the sweet peas are blooming, but the clematis has been blooming ever since I planted here. And so that is what's going on in this bed. And then there's even a grapevine. I don't think it's here. I think it's coming down from here, but I can't really be sure because there's a lot going on here. But we definitely look like we will have some grapes because I can see that is the beginning of grapes, and they're all over. I have a grapevine every other bed, so there's a grapevine here, and you can see all of the little wannabe grapes. And here's that other fish pepper I was talking about in the Greenstalk, because it's starting to get that variegation, so that's how I know it is a fish pepper. So that's basically it's not my whole garden, but it's basically all of the beds that I call my woodside beds, with the exception of that in-ground bed that I showed you. But that's everything I have growing in my woodside beds. I do have forever garden beds, which I have going around my fence, but there's not much going on in them because I'm changing them out. Like you can see, those are like carrots besides these onions. That bed is all flowers that I transplanted out of a different area, and I had to walk over here and see this because I didn't see this before. But lilies are starting to sprout and look gorgeous. And obviously we had potatoes here last year that's starting to sprout, and these are onions that I left here last year, and they're bulbing up. But this new area, these two beds are dramatically different. I planted them at the same time. They are different varieties, but this bed you can see is very tiny, dying back, and then this bed, it's only like that because my cat was like in here laying in here, but they've bulbed up. I think that would probably be my biggest bulb, but my cat kept digging in here, so that is why they look like this. But I definitely have to take them out because once they start flowering and trying to go to seed, they're not going to be in store very long. But this bed, you can see how they bulbed up, and I was fertilizing and watering them the same. But then this bed, barely, for the most part, they don't have bulbs. You can see like some of them don't have bulbs at all. And then this is parsley that self-seeded itself from this bed last year and came over to this bed, and I'm just leaving it in here because it's not doing any harm to the onions that already weren't doing good. But I fertilized those onions the same way. I'm definitely thinking it's the soil because maybe they have different soil mixture, and I was hesitant planting my onions there previously. I planted my onions up at the back, which is where I've had, and I planted them in one of these beds last year. But 2 years ago I planted them at the log raised bed. Last year I planted them in one of these beds, and then this year I decided to plant them in these forever garden beds. And I was worried about how they were going to do, but I thought if I fertilized and kept up with things that they would do good. But they did not do good. Well, at least definitely not that one bed. And so that just shows me that I have to work on that one bed. I think what happened with the purple bed that is doing much better is I had like cleaned out my rabbit hutches and just dumped like rabbit manure in there. I think I even dumped feathers in that bed. And obviously you can tell that I've done much more with one of the beds than I did the other bed. The other bed I think I just filled with like regular compost that I got in bulk, and like maybe topsoil, bag soil. I'm not really sure. I don't really remember what I filled those with, but I do know I topped them off with compost. But I do know that one bed I was just throwing stuff in there, and obviously it's doing much better than the other bed. So that goes to show me I have a lot to do to work on that peachy colored bed. Like I said, these beds are in transition because all of these are beets that I need to get out. They're white beets, and I saw that they already had They already have beets on them. And so I can take these out, and I did transplant some tomatoes back there, but I need to hurry up and get these beets out before they start going to seed. These are yellow carrots, I'm pretty sure, that I need to get out, and I planted tomatoes in the back, but I haven't been able to get them out yet, that I need to clear out because they're going to seed. Like this right here, this carrot's going to seed. And then 2 beds of bachelor buttons that I planted in November that are doing lovely, very pretty. And then these are orange carrots that I also need to get out, and my hope is to plant the last few tomatoes I have along this fence here. So my log raised beds, which is what we're walking to back now, they are in a transition this year. I'm trying to transition them out from log beds into the woodside beds that I have been trying to change my whole garden out into. But my plan for these log beds this year was to turn them into flower production, which turned out to be harder than I was thinking because of the amount of weeds that have been growing in these beds. So in this first bed right here is where I planted zinnias multiple times, like 3 times, and you can see how sporadic the zinnia germination is. But I added drip on them and planted the zinnias, and now you can see that it's actually starting to get some germination, I see. So hoping that this will fill out eventually, but this whole bed is supposed to be filled with zinnias. And then this bed, although it's covered with weed fabric, I also put plastic over it to try and kill any weeds that are germinating underneath the weed fabric, because that is what I had problems with as well, is like planting the weed fabric and then stuff trying to germinate underneath the weed fabric and then make its way through the holes. So I didn't even burn holes in that one. This next bed is a mixture of sunflowers and zinnias, and you can see sporadic germination as well, but I did reseed it the same time I reseeded the other bed, and I can see that now now that I put the drip on it, we do have some more zinnias germinating, so that gives me hope for this bed. These 2 beds I've struggled with so much. I planted asparagus here. I planted purple asparagus and green asparagus. I tried to uproot all of the green asparagus that was in this bed. Plant them in one of my forever garden beds up here, and then 2 of my forever garden beds in my orchard, and then cover this bed, and I did. But when I took it off, it was covered with weeds, so I had to weed it. I thought I was going to plant in it, but the weeds were unbearable, so I put plastic back over it. And then we also had asparagus growing back in here. I guess some crowns that I forgot and left, and so I'm going to keep this plastic over this bed this whole year going into next year, and then next year as I transition it out into a wood bed, I will think differently about this bed, and then hopefully that grass will be dead in this bed. I'm still not sure what I'm going to do about the other asparagus bed. The asparagus in that bed is still growing. I'm still getting asparagus out of it. It's just the weeds that are growing with the asparagus is really, really bad. So I don't know how to manage that. I've tried mulching it. It just doesn't help. So I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with that bed at the moment. And this bed was a winter squash bed, and I only put landscape fabric on this side because I didn't have like a 1-foot landscape fabric, and I didn't really feel like overlapping it because this bed is in transition. So I basically just planted a winter squash on this side and this side, but I didn't landscape that side, so I'm gonna have to weed that side. And I planted just basically every hole, the diagonal to where the holes are on this side. And you'll see that's a potato plant because there were potatoes planted in this bed last year. And this bed I recently seeded. I don't have drip on this. It's because I'm thinking about covering it. I planted it, then I rethought it because it was like the next day it came out and I saw all of the weeds popping through the holes. And so I didn't put drip on this because I'm thinking about covering it with this plastic as well and moving that rosemary. That rosemary has been there for about 2 years, but it was planted from just like a regular rosemary from the store that you get for like $6. And then the last bed over here, which doesn't have drip as well, is this bed. And the reason why I didn't put drip in this bed is because I've had so much trouble with this bed, even though you do see some yarrow and cosmos and stuff growing in here. Originally for this bed, I had landscape fabric, which is back there on this bed. Planted it out with flowers, cool flowers. They, for the most part, didn't do well because there wasn't drip over here. This is the farthest end from my hose, and so it's like difficult getting the hose back here. And so a lot of them died. So what I did was, and then the weeds were taking over. So what I did was take the landscape fabric off, weeded this whole bed, took out all of the flowers that were like sporadic, planted them all towards the front. And in the back half, I planted all of my basils that I had sprouted, all of my marigolds that I had sprouted from seed. And then this bed was looking pretty. It was weeded. And then my dogs and her puppies got in here and basically digged a big hole towards the back and killed all of my marigolds. I transplanted all of my basils. I transplanted. I had even put some dahlia seeds in there and some other seeds, like probably straw flower seeds, and basically just took all the soil and wiped it out. So instead of putting drip on this bed, this is another bed that I did not put drip on because I'm thinking I'm just going to cover it until I change out this bed. And then maybe even moving some of the flowers that I have in here. I'm not sure. So right now this bed is uncovered. It does have some flowers in it, lots of weeds as well. But I was really disappointed in this bed. And then not after her babies and her got in here and I kicked them out because the babies are still tiny enough to fit through these holes right here, which is 4x4 holes. Now we have them contained. But then a second time, like after I put all of the soil back in the bed, I saw the babies in here digging again, which was really, really unfortunate. And so that is when we contained them, and which is why I'm stuck with this bed. I'm getting distracted because I just saw this happy surprise. I have this blackberry vine that grows all over South Carolina, but I just saw that there was actually, a blackberry right there, and then there's lots of red ones in here, and there's more black ones in through here. And right there. Oh, there's actually a bunch of black ones in through here. That's so cool.
Good.
It tastes really good? Yeah, I'm sure it does because I didn't know that they were here. So that's basically everything I got going on inside the garden at the moment. I wanted to get this video out so that I could have it on record because I was coming out here and I'm like, these tomatoes are huge. Like that one tomato right there is literally at my stomach. Like, and I'm like, I have not shown you guys in full everything that I have growing in here. And so I definitely wanted to get this video out before I start harvesting and changes and all the things. So now that you guys saw that, thank you guys for hanging out with me, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.